When Ragnarok comes, the old world and gods will be stripped down and killed, as the gods of the old world fall, to be led into a new world by Baldur, who shines brightly like a star. Odin will die, Frigg will die, Thor will die, Baldur will live, Sol will live, and, of course, Loki will die. But who are they in Wuthering Waves? What does Norse mythology have to do with Wuthering Waves to begin with? Well, the name of the exostrider is Baldur, and the reactor core is its heart. He was killed, and currently Wuthering Waves is in a sort of interregnum in the war that is Ragnarok. In addition to this, here is the name of the Thrunodian, which is the fear of infinity, void, and our embodiment of the unknown. It is also known as Loki. In Ragnarok, the old gods are supposed to die, and depending on interpretation, they become one again with the universe, die like a normal human would, or maybe even reincarnate depending on other stories and some loose interpretations. So we have Loki as the Thrunodian, and we have Sol as probably Aemeath, Baldur as the exostrider, but what about Odin and Frigg? Well, that's really easy, that's Rover and Shorekeeper, but I will go more on them later on in the video. Each of these individuals can likely map with someone onto Norse mythology. For example, did you know that Thor's hair color is actually red and not blonde like Marvel would typically showcase? That said, allow me to present the following. Once we understand the pieces on the board, we can understand how the game is played and will play out, and just how exactly Rover will die. Lynae. Lynae is an outsider, so she doesn't need to click or be linked with anyone from Norse mythology. However, Lynae does seem to link to Freyja, as she deals with glamour, illusions, perception, magic, but more specifically with altering perception, such as going invisible, and of course with a rainbow, not in the Bifrost sense like with Heimdall, but in the beauty, aesthetic, and freeing sense of a rainbow. Mornye. For Mornye, despite part 2 of the 3.0 quest not being out just yet at the time of recording and writing, we have some bits and pieces of information about her, which I believe can grant us some deeper insight. I believe that Eir, the goddess of healing, applies to Mornye, as her sonata set leads us to believe that she is likely to be a healer. She, of course, had a connection with Baldur, though not as deep as Nana, or Nana? Nana, either way, did, but we already have a Nana in the game who deals with medicine, and, well, she kind of reminds me of Strelitza from Darling in the Franxx, but that's for something else entirely. Luuk, Sigrika, and Lucillia. Now, how in the world am I supposed to be able to map them on here, right? Surely it's impossible for me to accurately claim what deity or figure they'll be based on, and, well, you'd be right. But I will still make my best educated guess based on what little information we have, especially of Lucillia and Sigrika, the two that I am most likely to be wrong on. So, we will start with Sigrika. She is a candidate for the leadership of the Rowan tribes known as the Heliotic Six, and my current theory is that there's one member for each attribute since there's 6 attributes, but there's no evidence of that in the game. I just think it'd be a nice symbolic thing. She is a diligent student, part of the Birding Fan Club, and her quote is, "Should that expectation overflow?" This I find to be rather fascinating, as this could lead her to Eiger or Ran, for instance, due to being waves and literally connecting to the water and the birds, as, of course, the ocean watches birds the most. Then we also have Irun, which is more likely to be someone in charge of Bjartur Woods in my opinion, but it's still possible. She is someone who holds the golden apples and the expectations of renewal, youth, and life-giving. If we take a look at her design, we can come to some slightly better conclusions. Red hair, this actually connects her with Thor, who does have red hair. It could connect her to some interpretations of Brunhilde, whom is a Valkyrie. However, I believe that Thor connections are fairly strong, overflowing expectations are set upon Thor and nearly impossible trials set onto her by Loki, the Thrnodian in this case. But also because Thor typically travels by sea and is often seen with ravens and specifically other seabirds, such as seagulls for example. Stormy skies, encircling birds. Could she be Electro? Who knows? In the background of her artwork, there are droplet shapes and what appears to be circuitry. She could, of course, be tied to Sith as well, a mixture of the two, such as their daughter Power. No, not that one. This one. In addition to this, we get the idea that, due to her elf ears, she might be inspired by Frey, the patron god of Alfheim. In this, Frey gives up his sword for the woman he loves, and he perishes in Ragnarok as a result. He, alongside Thor, seem to be the best matches as they act at some point during Ragnarok. The only way to be certain about which is more likely is for us to meet her in person so we can actually, well, see what her personality is like. It's kind of hard to do a psychological analysis when, well, we have like 3 lines of dialogue that aren't even from them. But in addition to this all, she could be based off of Sigurd and Brunhilde, due to the red hair and therefore be more like a Valkyrie. We simply just don't have a lot of information on her at this very moment. In either case, the attributes Aero, Fusion, and Electro seem to be the most applicable in this situation, but without information on her personality, I cannot confirm which is to be more likely. However, what we can surmise is that she'll likely play a pivotal role in the battle against the Thrnodian. However, as I was writing this, it would appear that Luke's marketing just came out, meaning that we can link Sigrika likely to being Thor or related to Thor in some manner, such as through a sibling or a child of Thor, such as Power. We could simply designate her as a seer as well, and I could just be overanalyzing and overthinking here. As for Luke, luckily for us, this one is actually really easy now. He's very clearly linked with Freyr, giving up his sword to us, and I imagine this means, alongside the weapon description in the game, Luke is going to be gauntlets, and once again, while writing this script, they just came out with Aemeath and Luke's weapons. This is because Freyr gave up his weapon for someone he loved, and this weapon could fight by itself. The sword was autonomous, which sounds oddly similar to Spectro Rover, and how his sword spins and his summoning of swords as well with his skill. With Tauchi as the sister, Luke as the brother, Shorekeeper as the wife, we're just now missing Rover's mom and dad, perhaps born from the Thrnodians and Sentinels, though that is for a different video. And up next we have Lucillia. Now this one is very difficult to pinpoint. I found, I think, 2 lines of dialogue in my search for her. We just don't have a lot of information on her, just some barely can even consider it scraps. The fact that she's a principal in a position of leadership and from the New Federation, an ex-colleague of Morteffi's, I think she, at best I can say she's linked to Mimir. There isn't a whole lot to go off of, as well Norse mythology didn't really get that much of a chance to grow and expand to become fully codified. The best way to go off of teachers would be, well, Mimir. According to what I have found, though I have likely missed something. That said, the film we see in the background of her splash art could be a hint at this, as Mimir has knowledge of past, present, and future. This film could be her forte, which she can read to see past, present, or future and pass on knowledge. Though thinking about this now, I'm not entirely sure how that would translate to her being a playable resonator with this forte, so coordinated attacks maybe? I don't know. At any rate, we still have a few more characters to go over. Aemeath. For Aemeath, this one is rather difficult to pin down because she kind of fits the Avenger of Baldur, created by Odin to avenge, Baldur. However, I am having some doubts about this theory. This is because when we were given the teaser from her by Kuro, specifically the one on the 31st of December in 2025, the quote just matches perfectly with Sol. Helios, an artificial sun, and Sol, the actual sun. Is it perhaps the attempts of man to reach the gods are coming to fruition? Or is it nothing more than just vanity and hubris? It is perhaps that Aemeath might not fully be made out of code like a program, but instead is created from a fundamental program of the universe, like the Royan language, which can connect you directly to life itself. This still makes her more of an AI than Shorekeeper is, but Kuro has been very explicit about the lack of artificial intelligence being 100% mechanic and code, such as Iris. She's very clearly an AI. Shorekeeper is nowhere even remotely close to being an AI. She is closer to someone who is made in a test tube, or an angel created by God. She's not human, but anyone who calls her an AI is just objectively wrong. For Aemeath, she is perhaps linked to both Sol and Surtr, a fire giant of Surtr perhaps, but more on that a little bit later. And then of course, Rover and Shorekeeper are Odin and Frigg respectively. I don't think I need to go over why the wandering god, who is always manipulating events in the background for a specific outcome centuries down the line, ties in with Rover, nor why the goddess who turns anything into a home and awaits for her wandering husband to return to her matches with Shorekeeper. Oh, and for fun, I noticed that Bragi shares a lot in common with Cristoforo, namely being someone who narrates and tells stories. Cristoforo shares more in common with Apollo, but Apollo and Bragi do share some minor overlap with stories, poetry, and of course, tragedies. Though this god is supposed to die in Ragnarok, perhaps Cristoforo will sacrifice himself so that we can all get a second chance after we're defeated by Loki. Olaf won. However, I may have lied to you about the Thrunodian being just Loki, as I hinted at earlier in the video. In fact, Olaf 1 is the combination of Loki and Surtr, the destruction and cyclical nature of chaos. The yearnings that create Olaf 1 and make up its being are, in fact, our fear of the meaninglessness. That when faced with an unyielding discovery of the world, our search to understand the infinity we are within, we are met with nothing. And that is horrifying to our subconscious, that there is no inherent meaning to anything that we do, not even to infinity. It is nothing but fear. This means that in order to defeat this Thrunodian, we, in fact, must fight it by applying meaning. And where does meaning come from? Boundless human creativity. If you'll recall in my video predicting Rover's next attribute back in November of 2025, I said that Glacio Rover was the most likely candidate, and I do still believe this is the case, as it is a perfect symbolic match and psychological counter to the Thrunodian. But how would this even occur? Well, Rover has part of the Lament within him. It's been shown as this cold, desolate feeling, emptiness, and from an in-universe physics standpoint, that is what the Glacio attribute, well, does. However, I believe that Rover will journey into, or throughout, Hell at some point, and is likely to attain the attribute here. It may be that Rover will be defeated, sent to Hell, and that we will come out of Hell with the Glacio attribute. Hel is the daughter of Loki and sibling to Fenrir and Jormungandr. If the giant serpent we saw in the trailer and we fought is supposed to be Jormungandr, or equal to it as a symbolic reference, then it is perhaps likely that we are to get Fenrir and Hel as well. Hel is an individual who got the better end of the stick compared to her siblings, especially poor Fenrir. That said, she is still half corpse and half human, and wait a minute, isn't Frolova half Tacit Discord and half human? It might not be her, but it may be someone like Frolova. Hel is not easily moved by emotion. She is unyielding, calm, and solemn, but she is importantly not obsessive. I mean, aside from getting revenge for, well, what Odin did, but that's kind of the exception to the rule. She gets everyone who died of illness, old age, bad luck, you know, everyone who didn't die in combat. People like Frolova would have ended up in Hell. Hell is a cold place, much like how we have the journeying paradise for Leviathan. It is plausible here that this is an area created by the Thrunodian, sort of a domain, I guess you could say. And, well, we do see a scene of Rover traversing snow. Could this be Niflheim, or could it be Hell, who knows? Theoretically, it could be the Royan Frostlands, the surface, a mixture of the three, a mixture of the two. Now then, the real thing is that how does this all connect with the Exostrider, and how does it connect with the Threnodians themselves, and how it connects in a few ways. If we travel to Hell, and if it's because of Loki, aka Olaf 1, then Baldur doesn't come back because there's someone who did not weep for Baldur, perhaps Rover, perhaps Shorekeeper. No, it's the Threnodian itself. The Threnodian and Hell working together. Perhaps, indeed, Rover will travel to Niflheim, the beginning of it all, the place of stillness, of nothing moving, not even time. Although, it is perhaps that the Sentinels and Threnodians are related, and perhaps Threnodians are precursors or perhaps are evolutions of the Sentinels. In addition to this, Hell is connected to the chaos and to the depths, the abyss. It is perhaps that through this Bifrost-looking gateway that we travel there, or it is perhaps that Rover dies. I cannot confirm if it's Hell or Niflheim. Both of them, in my opinion, would provide very good symbolic storytelling, whether Rover, dies and goes to Hell and has to come back, or Rover travels to Niflheim because of a MacGuffin or whatever like that. I think both are, in my opinion, equally plausible and enjoyable. Perhaps, much like Odin, Rover must sacrifice something. Perhaps Rover in the past sacrificed their memories, essentially thousands of years built up life and experience, and we are now returning to claim the exchange. What if past Rover did not have all the attributes? What if past Rover was wiser but weaker than current Rover? What if past Rover gave up his life so he could hold multiple attributes, multiple lives? Just a thought. Cristoforo, of course, says that we are weaker than past Rover is, but is that because we're unwilling to let people die? Is it a weakness of our character, or is it a weakness in actual power? Luuk, and likely Mornye as well, knew Rover would leave, and I find it likely that Rover was doing research there just before he left to go sacrifice his memories and, well, tell Shorekeeper and all that. Rover may have found the answer he was looking for. Shall we gain this new attribute in defiance of this answer, or shall we gain this new attribute because of the humanity within the answer? Mankind's greatest weapon, its sharpest blade, is imagination. It is applying meaning to the meaninglessness. It is simply our own free will to give meaning, receive meaning, and to become meaning. So what form will Glacio Rover take? We've a scythe for Havoc Rover and an outcry for more unique weapons. What better form to wield if not the legendary spear, known as Gungnir? Or, if we stay strictly as a sword, then perhaps Kram is a fine weapon, a weapon used in defiance of gods and beings that look down at humanity, such as Threnodians. A weapon of cold wrath. However, the weapon known as, and forgive me for butchering this, Skofnung? The weapon known as Skofnung could also be applicable here. It is a very unique sword which applies a curse to enemies, or in other words, could apply Glacio Chafe onto enemies. Although, it might be a little bit difficult for our Lord Arbiter here, specifically the Lady Arbiter, because one of the rules of the weapon is that women are not allowed to touch it. So keep that in mind. But if we look at legendary weapons from Norse mythology, they might still yet inform us just a little bit about what Glacio Rover might look like. My guess is Glacio Chafe, but I'm not sure if Glacio Rover will be a DPS, a sub-DPS, or a hybrid. Probably a hybrid like Spectra Rover. My guess is that we're getting hybrid DPS support, and so hybrid makes the most sense here with Glacio Rover. And it does actually make sense. Spectral Rover slows down time, perhaps Glacio Rover can stop time. As, of course, Niflheim was a world where it is timeless, unmoving, not until fire meets and creation of the world begins with Ymir, a cosmic beginning, a calling back to whom Rover was, gazing into the past yet again? Maybe. However, the connections between Aemeath and Rover becomes more apparent with the following. If we look at the two as Rover and Aemeath, then we can get some conclusions. In my previous video on screen, I predicted that Aemeath will be fusion. If we take Rover as Glacio and Aemeath as fusion, then this actually gives us Niflheim and Muspelheim? Muspelheim? A home of fire. A realm of stillness and cold against a realm of fire and motion, with creation, the world, our world, beginning when these two meet together. Aemeath might not necessarily be Surtr when she says that she wants to burn everything and start anew, but it could instead be referring to the concept of trying again with what you have with you. Not a square one back from the beginning, but in her an artificial creation, gaining one of mankind's most precious gifts, the indomitable human spirit, to always get back up and try again, to start again. Aemeath may be born out of Surtr, as Surtr, of course, has a lot of artificial creations, an entire army's worth. No, his giants did not have a mother, it was just him there, and don't think too much about it. It was just Rover busting a quickie, and so anyway, we see that there are some rather interesting connections between Glacio Rover and Fusion Aemeath. That they complement each other almost too well for it to be a coincidence, symbolically speaking. It is my belief that perhaps Rover has sacrificed or will need to sacrifice something, that we will gain information about past Rover, perhaps not the full reason as to why they gave up their memories, but some better understanding. We understand it is necessary, but we do not know why or that it is necessary. Knowledge and comprehension are two entirely separate entities, something Rover as Odin can bridge for us, the player. Now then, on to Rover and Odin's death, the finale of this video. Firstly, we need to properly assign the world tree and how it fits in Yggdrasil. In Norse mythology, the world is made up of several realms, including something called Ginnungagap. This is, in actuality, chaos. This is where the Thrunodian itself should be from. With this, we can also map Midgard in the following manner. But we do need to understand what the Strider Gate is. This is a gateway, naturally, and the Well of the Thrunodian, or close by it. With this, we can read it as a gateway of some kind that leads to probably Ginnungagap. It is chaos. If it seeps through into the real world, this might come off as a void of existence, as erasure, or enhancements of some kind. At the top of this sword, we have Niflheim, a cold and endless plain of, well, ice, cold, and stillness. It is the northernmost part of Norse mythology, but north doesn't actually mean up. It just so happens we have the physical sword to use as a basis of a tree here. Then naturally, we have Lynae Freyja itself as Midgard. This is the easiest one to see. However, what about under it? Well, we could say that this is where Muspelheim is. This could just mean that it's the opposite pole on the planet as well, or it could be where the tip of the sword finds its end, an underground area. Asgard is likely connected through this Bifrost-looking area that we find, or is Asgard itself. It is this place made out of shimmering light, and like a rainbow, it is likely where the Heliotic Six convene, but it is the only place where we can connect the Bifrost to. To get to Muspelheim, however, we might have to pass through Nidavillr, perhaps obtaining a weapon such as an artificial fusion resonator named Aemeath. Nidavillr is where the most excellent craftsmen exist, ones who create the most powerful weapons and items. Weapons that can slay dragons, giants, and even gods. Then we have Hell. It is the lowest point in Norse mythology. Well, technically second lowest, as the chaos would both be the highest and lowest points, but within creation itself, it is the lowest point. It is where the dead go to rest. And whether in waves, this is likely to take the place in one of three ways. This could be the cassette room, as it has copies of everyone's frequencies. However, a copy is not your actual soul. It isn't actually you. The link between your consciousness and this copy is non-existent. From the copy's perspective, it seems like nothing happened, but this is yet another attempt of mankind's arrogance, yet Another reason why the Lament wants us gone. Instead, the Threnodian itself likely has its own place within chaos, and therefore within the collective unconscious. It might not be that Aleph 1 erases human existence, but it too is taking them to its own domain. Threnodians are songs of grief from humanity and the Lament. This would mean that Aleph 1's place in humanity's collective unconscious could be an endless void of nothing, of coldness. It could be the destruction we see in Rover's mind and the login screen, or perhaps Jotunheim. Jotunheim is a place of chaos, raw nature, and primal forces. It is a place where she who offers sorrow comes from, Loki's consort. Sorrow, grief, lament. Doesn't that sound familiar? Both Loki and Angrboda are Jotun. We could be traveling to the core of the Lament itself, to Rover's old home. Is Rover a god who failed to save his home and now seeks to save others from the Lament? Is that what the Sentinels are? It is my belief that Rover will travel throughout Yggdrasil, from Midgard to Niflheim, Hell, and Chaos, likely with some kind of Nidavillr and or Muspelheim analog as well. Traveling through these, Rover is likely to die in a confrontation with the Threnodian. However, what if he doesn't? What if Rover doesn't die fighting the Threnodian, but in an accident while saving someone else? This aligns both with Rover and how he is defeated before, but also is how one would get to Hell. Remember, those who die in battle, fighting, go to Valhalla, but those who die of an accident, of illness, of age, they go to Hell. If Hell is a sonorosphere or a place created by the Threnodian, then this line makes more sense. If Rover dies not in a fight, then he goes to Hell. This is where that goddess will often make deals with people to allow them back into the world. What would happen? What would the Fraxidus be able to accomplish with Rover out of the picture? Whether or not it's the Threnodian or the Fraxidus, the two of them together, I do believe that Rover will end up in Hell at some point. The boring way to look at it would be that he's just going there to save Sigrika, like Heracles in the Heracles movie, but I'm of the mind Rover will have a death and rebirth of some kind in this region. However, there's one person I have failed to mention. The Grand Architect has a Germanic name shown on screen. I believe it is pronounced Schwarzloch, and is also a wanderer. He himself is connected to death in some way. Could it be that the Grand Architect is actually Odin and not Rover? Will Cristoforo swap the Grand Architect and Odin's plans, or is the Grand Architect Hel, the one who will lead the destruction of the gods, the one who will lead the destruction of the world and have it be remade anew? The Grand Architect himself fits the role of Odin, but can also fit a symbolic role of Hel as well. The Grand Architect and the Rover share similar roles in fact. Is it outside the realm of possibility that Rover is fated to die here, and Cristoforo swaps their roles and therefore their fates, or perhaps it is the other way around, where the Grand Architect is fated to die here, and so Cristoforo swaps their roles and fate. Cristoforo wants humanity to be free, to be human still. There is a fundamental deception going on here from Cristoforo. Rover's finale. In the end, the gods will die, but which gods and what foes? Will it be Rover and Shorekeeper? After all, Shorekeeper seems to know something we don't about the future. Or will it be Lucillia and the Grand Architect? In the end, a god will die, Ragnarok will come, Luuk, Sigrika, Rover, they will face some form of fight, some form of death or near death. Mornye perhaps will as well, assuming she is related to Eir in this theory. We will see Rover's greatest defeat, or his greatest triumph, where the man who erased his memories, to erase as much of his existence as possible, so he can become unwoven by fate, a fresh restart ahead of fate, becoming the unwritten one. However, fate will fill those gaps and holes. Fate still weaves and mortals must sleep. Fate will always catch up to those seeking to run from it and escape it. Yes, even the Lord Arbiter himself may be on a timer. No book is limitless, no story without an ending, and the master of stories, Cristoforo, is likely to be a driving force within L'Hai Roi, watching the culmination of fates that are coalescing into the event known as Ragnarok.